play the Alekhine defense this time. So knight f6, we provoke white to play e5. So we give him a very strong center. It seems to be a very strong center with a lot of pawns. But the whole idea of black's setup is to attack the center later on with his pieces. And we just castle quickly. And we put some pressure on this pawn here on d4. So we start doing this by playing knight c6. So there's the first attacker. Then we attack the knight. The knight is a defender of d4. And then we attack the pawn again with the bishop. So here we already threaten to take on d4. So he needs to do something about it. And what he wants to do is now weaken his kingside position. This is not, I think, not a very good idea, because we like to take an advantage out of this. I mean, it looks very, very loose here, the position. And now we can win the first pawn. I want to keep the bishops here. I think they are strong. And let's go back. And he even loses position more. And I mean, look, here are so many weak squares now. And this knight is not a good piece here at the moment. I think the bishop is good, so I would even consider giving him to give him a pawn. So let's assume I play d5 and he plays c5. I think I could play knight c4, and if he takes, he wins a pawn, but the bishops are very strong. And if he takes here, I take back with a knight, and the knight might be very good here on d5. Okay, here we have the position I talked about, and I think I will do it. I mean, the bishop is very important defender of the white's king. So we exchange a piece from the king side against a piece from the queen side. And this bishop might get very, very strong afterwards. And so we jump to c6 back. Okay, but now I rather go to c4 again. All right. So this bishop is not that good here on e7. Let's try to grab some squares for the bishop, maybe. So I want to exchange some pawns here. Okay, but let's improve the position of the queen now. I think it's very good here on the white squares.
Check.
Now he lost the knight. And the game is over. If he goes to, for example, to h2, I could play bishop d6. So sometimes it's not that good to directly grab a piece, but maybe consider making an even better move. So I mean, the first impression was to take here on f3, but if I play bishop d6, he can't play bishop d6 because his queen is hanging, and he can't protect the bishop anymore. So a lot of pieces are in very bad shape. and this bishop is very strong. I can just take the knight. The problem is still around, you know, because let's take the queen. I could have played queen h4 first. So let's try to knock him out. The white squares are very weak, so if he allows me to do so, I would just mate him here in one of the white squares. He can't move the bishop, because if he moves the bishop there's a mate on h4. Let's assume he takes here. Yeah.
Checkmate.
What I think you can learn from this game are two things. One is to find out the weaknesses in the enemy's or the opponent's plan, and the importance maybe of not taking the exchange if it's possible, because I mean you can see now how both these elements worked out very good for me. I mean there were ways of playing better, especially if you if you have a long game where you can think a lot and stuff, but we are in a blitz game, so you need to make a quick decision. And what you could see at the beginning is that white was weakening his king side. He played h3 and then g4, and there I think already there's a weak spot now, the king side. So there are a lot of weaknesses around the white king. So already from here I thought about, you know, attacking here. I could always try to break up even more lines, and like h5 is always in the air, but I can also try to provoke him to even advance his pawns. Then there are even more weaknesses. At the moment the white squares here, like g4, is well protected, but later in the game you could see that my queen was finally staying here on g4. So this is one idea in the game, and the other was around I mean the other idea was the white squares around his kings, around the king side, are weak squares. And who is the defender of the white squares? The bishop here on e2, because it's a white squared bishop. So I really wanted to get this bishop, even if it costs me a pawn. So I played this knight c4 stuff. And finally he takes the pawn, and I think he was quite happy with it. But now these squares are really even weaker than before. And if you look at it, I can win the exchange. I can play bishop d3, and I think it was possible later as well, here also, you know. And but you can do this, but I think the bishop is such a strong piece, and so I kept the bishop.
Check.
And yeah, this was just an overlooking thing of white. He didn't
Check.
see that I was threatening queen g4, and the game is over. And you can see that the white squared bishop was playing a very important role here. There were so many weaknesses, and
Checkmate.
here you can see that the bishop is, for example, controlling g2, and the king can't escape. And if white, you know, didn't do something like this, I could maybe try to mate him here also on g2 with the queen via f3. I also, and that's what I tried to do, is bringing up the rooks, so I could open up the f file, maybe even the h file. If you take, he takes back. There are a lot of threats around, and if I take, then it could already play knight, queen h5. King doesn't have any squares. Why? Because the bishop is a very strong piece, and he needed to sacrifice the bishop here. Then I take, and it's a checkmate again. Yeah, just assume it's it's my move. I will take here. He takes back. Queen h5. No square for the king because the bishop is strong. He needs to play bishop h4, and then it's checkmate. And this game is all about weak squares around the opponent's king. And the weak squares in this case were white squares, and this is why the white bishop, my black bishop on the white squares was a very important piece, and at the same time the white bishop on the white squares was a very important piece, but he exchanged it for a pawn, and I think this was the beginning of the end.